We're all familiar with PMS, what it is, when it arrives, and how it impacts our lives as females, and maybe other people's lives too, on a monthly basis. Many of us have probably learned over time ways to mitigate or at minimum deal with these symptoms so that it doesn't completely derail us. Premenstrual Dysphoric Disorder, otherwise known as PMDD, may be a diagnosis that you're less familiar with, though also may be experiencing if your symptoms of PMS seem to greatly interfere with your quality of life. Hi, I'm Jess. I'm a clinical nutritionist, and this channel is all about optimizing your diet and lifestyle for better mental health. And today we're going to be talking about PMDD, which is something that I am super passionate about. Most people just think that PMDD is basically like extreme PMS, but there is actually much more at play. See, females with PMDD don't necessarily have either more hormones or a stronger hormone imbalance than other females. You and me could both have the exact same hormone fluctuations throughout the month, but if I have PMDD, then I'm going to be more sensitive to these hormonal shifts neurologically and mentally, which is generally what's causing symptoms. And this is why PMDD is actually categorized as a mental health depressive disorder and conventionally treated with SSRIs. So let's dive into the nitty-gritty details of PMDD so that you can figure out if this potentially applies to you. So the clinical definition of premenstrual dysphoric disorder is a severe mood disorder that's categorized by many cognitive affective symptoms that occur in a cyclical pattern on a monthly basis before menstruation. So how is PMDD different from PMS? Well, premenstrual symptoms also include a combination of mood, behavioral, and physical alterations prior to menstruation. Most females only report a mild discomfort that does not impede their lives. 5 to 8% of women conversely experience debilitating symptoms that cause significant psychological stress as well as functional impairment. To know that your monthly suffering is more than PMS, it basically depends on your symptoms, the severity of those symptoms, and of course, the timing. So let's go through some of the most common symptoms. Symptoms of PMDD include extreme mood swings, irritability and anger, depression, anxiety, and a lot of feelings of overwhelm, emotional sensitivity, uncontrollable crying, that's my favorite, cognitive symptoms like difficulty concentrating, brain fog, and forgetfulness, nervousness, paranoia, heart palpitations, and when it's really bad, feelings of hopelessness and suicidal thoughts. You can have a lot of physical symptoms like fatigue, breast tenderness, appetite changes, and headaches. So the level of severity with these symptoms really refers to if you're experiencing them, how debilitating are they? Women with PMDD find that their symptoms are associated with significant distress, interference with work, school, usual activities, and of course, their relationship with others. Let's talk about the timing for a minute. Because many of these symptoms can also be signs of other neuropsychiatric disorders, it's important to recognize PMD symptoms in relevance to your monthly cycle. Symptoms of PMDD are going to generally show up post-ovulation. So for most women, this is about day 14 after the first half of their menstrual cycle. We have two phases of our menstrual cycle, the follicular phase, which is the first phase that starts on day 1 of your period, where essentially your estrogen continues to rise until you reach ovulation, and then after ovulation you go into your luteal phase. So while it could start anytime post-ovulation, symptoms are generally the worst during that premenstrual window, which is about a week before your period. Your symptoms should improve once your period starts and you're back into the follicular phase of your menstrual cycle. So what exactly causes PMDD? I've done a ton of research on this, and it's actually quite fascinating what we do know so far, and also what we don't know. So like I mentioned before, PMDD is a sensitivity to hormonal shifts. So what causes some females to be more sensitive to these fluctuations? What we do know about PMDD is that there's likely a few factors at play, the first big one being neurotransmitter deficiencies and imbalances. Women with PMDD experience a decreased sensitivity to GABA receptors as well as serotonin abnormalities in their luteal phase, which remember is that second half of your menstrual cycle. GABA is our calming, inhibitory neurotransmitter that I always tell people is responsible for making us feel chill. Serotonin is, yes, the happiness hormone, but is also responsible for making us feel calm, at peace, and at ease. So if we're having issues with GABA sensitivity and serotonin in that second half of your cycle, then you're likely going to be experiencing a lot of those mood symptoms that we mentioned earlier. It is additionally observed that symptoms are aggravated during tryptophan depletion, which totally makes sense. If you look at this chart here, you'll see that tryptophan is the only precursor to making serotonin. So if we don't have enough tryptophan available, then that of course is going to affect our serotonin levels. The next factor is of course genetic susceptibility. Studies on twins have shown that there are both inheritable traits and genetic polymorphisms that make someone more susceptible to experiencing PMDD. This includes genetic variations that potentially accounts for those neurotransmitter sensitivities to hormonal fluctuations. Another factor is potentially your HPA or hypothalamic pituitary axis and inflammation. Though this is still being researched, there is some evidence to show that women with PMDD have higher levels of chronic stress, trauma, inflammatory cytokines, potentially an altered HPA axis with irregular cortisol levels. So that stress hormone cortisol that we pump out when we're stressed may be either playing a part in the etiology of PMDD or at least making it worse. So what do we do about all of this? To really figure out if you might suffer from PMDD and how to start approaching healing, the first thing that you really want to do is track your symptoms. There is no test for PMDD. It's really a diagnosis that's given off of meeting certain criteria. So it's important to ensure that the symptoms you're experiencing align with that post-ovulation timing that we mentioned before. You can track your cycle, the symptoms you're having, the severity of these symptoms on several free period app trackers. I will leave a link to some of my favorite ones below. There is actually an app called Me versus PMDD, but there's also some other really great apps as well. After you track your symptoms and then have the data, then you can talk to your doctor and decide what approach that you would like to take. Like mentioned before, conventional treatments for PMDD is going to be something like an SSRI or maybe even a hormonal birth control, but you may be inclined to want to try a more natural alternative approach. There are supplemental interventions that can address the neurotransmitter imbalances and tryptophan depletion we discussed. And of course, there are also dietary interventions that have shown to be really successful in the management of PMDD. So if that's something that interests you, then you could check out my video on natural treatments for PMDD. If you got value out of this video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye.